Hello everyone and welcome to another tips and tricks. This time we will be talking about stamp cleaner and how to best store your stamps. So as you can see, I already have a whole variety of stamp cleaners here, but let's move those aside and start with the old-fashioned one that I'm sure you all are familiar with. That was that double-sided stamp cleaner where you usually would spray your stamp cleaner right on top here, and then you would take your stamp, just rub it over, and it would clean your stamp. Then you have to let it dry a little bit. Some stamp cleaners had a little pad here where you could dry it off, otherwise just leave it and let it dry. So this was the old stamp cleaner, and as you see, I still have one. Then the next generation of stamp cleaners, we had this little brush, and some of you might have this little brush still in their stock. If you're lucky, you might find it online on the website. But this was really a nice handy tool to really get your stamps a nice clean scrub. And you would do the same thing. You could either spritz the cleaner on your stamp, or you would spritz the cleaner on your brush right here. Problem with this one is when you spray, it seeps everywhere. It doesn't really absorb it, but what it does, it gets in those little nooks and cracks and really cleans your stamp nicely off. So these are the two that we used to have until they retired. And what we have these days, it's called a chamois. And mine, I cut mine apart, as you can see. They're in the catalog, new, and I love this thing. Let me show you right here. So it's called a stamp chamois, and you actually get two pieces of the chamois. They're 6x6, and the nice thing is you can cut them apart. That's what I do, because I don't need a big cleaner. For me, it's easier if they're cut in smaller pieces. So this is a pretty big one, and like I said, just take your scissors and clean it. When you get them, let me put this aside for the moment. When you get those, they're pretty stiff. And I will show you mine, and I know that's how they look like after they've been used over and over again. So mine, I had mine way before we had those in the catalog. So my base color was pink because it's from a different vendor, but it's the same principle. So you can see how used this thing is, but it does not give off any of the ink that you might have absorbed at one point in time. I store mine in these little containers. Every time I use them, I just pop them back in there, simply because if they're laying on my desk, they end up on a project, on a card, and there is nothing I can do once the water seeps out of this and seeps onto your white cardstock or your card base or your envelope. You will see all sorts of colors, and there's nothing you can do to take this off. So just start to put them in a little container on your desk, and that way you never have that issue. I let mine sit in here so it dries off overnight. It gets really crunchy, and as you can see here, this is very, very tough. So not at all like you would think of a nice absorbent piece of stamp cleaner. But when you let water run over it a little bit and you just work the water in, it gets soft like this side. I hope you can see the difference. So this one is hard as a rock like this, or like this piece when it comes. Just let the water run over it, work it in a little bit, and they will get nice and soft. And what you want to do is, once they're wet, you just wring them out really hard. So now they're just damp. There's not much moisture in there, but there is plenty to clean your stems. And you don't really need to use your stamp cleaner. I still use my stamp cleaner like once in a couple of months. Or if my stamp is really dirty, I spray my stamp with the stamp cleaner a little bit, and then I just use my chamois and go over, rub it in and clean it off. And you can clean your blocks with that too, everything. But normally I would just use this without even the cleaning solution. So if you like to stamp, this is awesome. And like I said, I can stamp in black, and I take it off. Let's do this. Get some cleaner here. Let's stamp a nice flower here. You ink it up. And you might wonder, why is the stamp red? Well, I will get to that in a second. So, might be still a little bit wet, but that's okay for demonstration purposes. So let's say I stamp my stamp, and you can see there's still plenty of ink left. So let's do another stamp. And now I want to clean it. So all I do is I take my chamois and I wipe it off. And yes, it's in here. It doesn't come off, but it comes off your stamp. Really nice. And to prove that I did clean it, you can see here, there's nothing. If I left a little nook here somewhere where it was a little bit, you just go over it, but it does a perfect job. So I really, really like these, and they come in handy. Again, make sure you have a little container where you put them in. You don't need to seal them. And that is one thing. Do not put them in a plastic bag and seal it to keep the moisture in. They will stink by the time you open them. Just let them dry out. I just leave mine in here in the morning when they're super dry. Like I said, like this one is. I just go rinse it under water. Keeps it nice and moist. And I have both in here. And they stay moist pretty much throughout the day. There is one special cleaner you need, and this is for the Stays On ink. So if you have Stays On ink, you cannot use the method with the stamp, with the chamois to just clean your stamp, because Stays On ink is a solvent ink, which means you can stamp with this one on any slick surface, and the ink is more potent. So not like all our other inks that are water-based, dye inks, or your pigment inks, you usually can clean off easily with water. These ones need a specific cleaner, and this is an old Stays On cleaner. I don't really use Stays On that much anymore. But this one is a specialty cleaner, or it at one point came in this form. It's got a little sponge on there so you can rub down your stamp. In another video next week, I think I have it on my schedule, I will talk about the different types of inks we have, and I will get more into what the differences are and what is a good use for Stays On. But like I said, if you're using Stays On as a ink, you need some stronger cleaner, and you need to specifically made for Stays On cleaner for this, in this occasion. All other stems, you can use your chamois. I also, if you have pigment inks, and again, what is a pigment ink? I will explain to you next week. But you can see the difference between, this is one of our old ink pads, but I have this for so long and it still works. So just to show you the difference, I hope the camera will pick it up. If you can see, this is a really nice smooth surface fabric, while this one is a little bit more spongy. And when I push my ink, my stamp in here, you might be able to see this. So pigment inks are thicker. They take longer to dry, but they show beautiful on dark cardstocks. And as nice as they are to stamp, let me see if I find a piece of cardstock here. as nice as they are to stamp with, they need time to dry. And then what you end up is you have a lot of white usually on your stamp, or whatever pigment color you're working with. And yes, you can use your chamois to clean them off, and it cleans off nicely like the other inks. You just have to dip in a little bit to get those little divots here clean. And this is a small stamp, but if you do this with a bigger stamp like this one, that is a lot of ink that will be in your chamois, and it usually is a little bit messy. So what I prefer to do is if I have a big stamp like the flower here, and I will stamp with pigment inks, so with the thick ones, what I like to do is I take the whole block, go in the bathroom, and just hold it under running water for a little bit. Use my finger to just get most of it off. It's water solvent, so those inks will come off easily, but it is just less messy. Plus you get your block better cleaned. So that's just my preference. You can use the chamois like I said, and then maybe just go and rinse this one out. So it's either or. But I just like to hold it under running water. That way it gets clean as well. And that's pretty much all you want to do with your stems. There's not really anything special otherwise that you want to need to do. If your stems don't clinch to your blocks anymore, and that can happen because, you know, we have oil on our fingers, on our skin that sticks to it here. It could be that we have picked up some glitter, some fuzzies, you name it. Just take warm water, rinse it, put it face down and let it dry. Don't tap it dry with a towel or anything, because then you leave lint again on the sticky side. So just let it sit there and dry, and once they're dry, you put them back on your carrier sheet and you're good to go. And if I use a stamp a lot at the end of when I'm done with, you know, a certain project I do, and I use a lot of different types of inks, I often use my spritz cleaner quick and really give it a thorough cleanup. Otherwise, the chamois is good to go. So this is a really great tool to have, and like I said, you can cut this apart and get smaller pieces. We use those in classes all the time. At the beginning we used like baby wipes, which works too, but sometimes they leave little fuzz endings on here too, or they're just, the ink will not adhere to the stamp as well. So I prefer to use those. And same thing with the baby wipes. What happened was people would pull a baby wipe, use it and leave it on their mat, and next thing you know is, oh, there is my cardstock base on there, there is my envelope there, and everything gets splattered with water and yucky color. So having this on the table, everybody can just grab it if they need it to clean the blocks before they stamp, or to clean the stamp off completely, and it just sits there and they just toss it back in, and we don't have that issue anymore. And yeah, so these are cleaning information for your stamp. Like I said, it's not a big thing. If you don't have a lot stamps, maybe by the end of the year, just run them under warm water, let them sit, put them back on the carrier sheet in your pouch and store them. One thing I didn't mention last time when we talked about stamping, you might wonder, these are clear stamps, and even so they look like this one here looks like it's red, or this one looks like it's red, but as I showed you, it is absolutely clean. This happens with pretty much any clear stamp that is out there on the market. When you use certain types of inks, and this does not have anything to do right now if it's a StazOn ink or if it's a a dye-based ink or a pigment ink. This has to do with the color you pick. Every color that has red pigments in it, so reds, pinks, browns, blacks, they can leave or this discoloration on your stamp. There is nothing wrong with the stamp. The stamp is still okay. They just pick up, the red is a very intense pigment. They just pick up the pigment and it's stained. So there is not much you can do to get this off. It happens. It's just a nice seasoning, and you know that your stamp was well loved when you were stamping it. Again, they're super clean. There is nothing wrong, and I will show you. Let's grab this one here, peel it off, and as you can see, it looks like it's pinkish right now. And let me just grab some yellow, and as you can see, I didn't even clean it because I don't need to. It's clean, and there is no pink to it. I don't have my pouch in underneath, but as you can see, the red does not come off, so it doesn't harm your stamp. It doesn't do anything to your images. You just have to make sure you wipe it clean when you're done, and the red tint will stay, but it's not harmful to your stamp or anything. And over time, like I said, it just happens. It doesn't happen to all colors, but if you use reds, browns, black, they all have the red pigment in them, and they will stain. And I have another example here. Those are some of the Christmas cards. Again, we use some brown stamping it or some black, and it just leaves a little hint of pink on your stamp. These ones might look a little bit different to you, and you say, okay, this one is red like the other one, but what is with the two, the Santa and the Santa on the sleigh here, or the ho ho ho? They're a little bit reddish, but they're also pretty black looking. And this, as you can see here, I put it on here, I hope you can, let me hold it up. As you can see how it is still reddish, but it also has another undertone with it. It should be clear. This happens when you use StazOn. When you just use it once or twice, it might not be a big deal. But if you use this over and over again, I literally have stamp sets from Christmas cards where we use StazOn a lot, and where you can't even see through the image anymore. So if there's ink getting in between here, even so, it doesn't stamp on your image, on your paper, but this stains, and it's like just one black blurb. Again, there's nothing wrong with the stamp per se. It still stamps the image nice and crisp. The only thing is you can't see through at one point anymore, so you might need a stamp positioner if it gets too bad. But that is the other thing that can stain your images a lot. And that is one other reason why I do not use StazOn a lot anymore. We used it a lot for watercolor when we're using watercolor pencils, things like this, but there are other ways to actually stamp with regular ink without having trouble getting smudges, but then using StazOn ink. Here is a rubber stamp. I know it's a different company, but we don't make those. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see those little veins here where it kind of like the rubber is slowly coming apart, breaking apart. This was one image where I stamped also with StazOn a ton of images, because I would use my watercolor pencils to give the little guy some color. And this is due to the cleaner. So you can see how harsh this is and how much stress it puts on a rubber stamp. It will put the same stress on any of your clear stems too. So be delicate when you're stamping with StazOn. I'm not saying you can't use it, you shouldn't use it. Just make sure you thoroughly clean it and you're not using it over and over and over again. This one is another image, but this is a little bit bigger, but still it starts to get little cracks here too from the cleaner. So just be aware. When you're using StazOn, that's the only, pretty much the only thing where you need a special cleaner. Okay, last but not least, how do you store your stems? Well, that depends on what stems you have. So our Close to My Heart stems come on this carrier sheet, and I love that because you have your negative and then you just match up your stamp bag on there so you know if you have all your stems together, and they go in this little pouch. This is an old pouch, still got the bottom to snap in the back, which was nice, but it also takes up a lot of space. So I ended up, for those stem sets that I kept, I took the button out and just folded it in. That way it's flatter. And I also took my papers out because all I needed was the stamping pouch and the stamp itself. But nowadays you can get a whole package. There are normally 3 in a set. And these are the pouches that we use these days. So all our stamps come in those pouches, but if you need extra, you can buy extra. And it just slits in the back and you're good to go. And you can put any stamp you want in there. So if you have rubber stamps, thicker ones, not the wooden ones, but thicker ones, you can put those in there, or other clear stamps. Even for, I mean, our dies come on this nice, they all come on this nice magnet sheet. They would fit in here, but not all of them. So some of the bigger ones, like this one, I'm lying, this one fits too. Let me see. This one would go in there too, but they're usually pretty protected, being on the carrier sheet here, on the magnetic sheet. So these can be ordered separate too, and they're in our organizer section in the catalog. That's stamp envelopes. They're 6 by 6 and there are 3 in a package. And we have the same ones. They're for 12 by 12 papers or pages or anything you want to prepare. There are also 3 big envelopes in there. So this is a nice way to store them. And depending on how many you have, My Acrylic Organizer, you get up to 15 of those pouches with your stamps in there. Secure them. Or you need one of the large craft organizers, but that's a really pretty big one. I usually have mine in a basket that I bought simply because it's easier for me to look through, and they're just sitting right above me here, and to check and make sure I got everything that I need. So that is pretty much all for today about stamp cleaning and what is best. So remember, StazOn needs an extra special cleaner. Otherwise, take the chamois. I put the blue one here because ours is blue. You can use a spritz cleaner with it, or you just use it with plain water. Don't get scared when it ends up looking like this. This is still perfectly, and I always think the more ink there's on there, the better they get. So they clean really nice and thoroughly. If they dry out like this one or like this one, remember, hold it under warm water or lukewarm water. Just work it in a little bit, and once the whole thing is soaked up with water, it's nice and spongy again. Wring it out, and then it's just damp, and that will go a long way. If you have the feeling that it's dirty, just go and rinse it off. There is no need to use soap or anything to, these stains don't come out. I don't wash them, it's just clean. And when you're done, let them sit and dry out. Do not put them in a plastic bag because they will stink. And this is for all inks, solvent inks like our regular inks. The pigment inks, you can use this too, but if you have a pigment ink, maybe go and rinse off the stem first, depending how big it is, and then go over with your chamois to clean it. Well, I hope this was a little bit more information about cleaning and taking care of your stems. If you have questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next week, and we will be talking about the different types of inks we have and what they can be used for. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.